Will we maybe see a Deadpool 4? Oh God, no.
Deadpool has broken more boundaries than just the fourth wall. It has become the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time.
I had absolutely no input into what
happens when the man who rewrote the superhero rulebook suddenly finds himself trapped inside the very system he disrupted. Ryan Reynolds was never supposed to be just another face in Marvel's lineup. He wasn't meant to be standing quietly in the shadows while the Avengers hogged the spotlight, or waiting for a studio to decide whether his character was brand safe enough to survive. He was different, stubborn, sarcastic, and relentlessly determined. And because of that, he didn't just play Deadpool, he became Deadpool.
I'm going to bomb or win. I want to have a say in it, and I want to have some authorship. And if I'm going to bomb, I want to be the architect of my own demise. I don't want to be a passenger on someone else's nose-diving jet.
Deadpool wasn't just another superhero movie that joined the endless wave of capes and CGI spectacles. It was a cultural reset, raw, violent, unapologetically funny, and gleefully self-aware in ways that Hollywood executives had sworn would never work. It roasted the system, roasted the studio, roasted itself, and still broke every record that mattered. At the time, Reynolds looked like the ultimate winner. He had pulled off the impossible, turning a character that studio execs openly laughed at into one of the most profitable R-rated franchises in history. But here's the twist. Success doesn't guarantee security. In Hollywood, the bigger the empire you build, the more dangerous it becomes when you no longer play by the emperor's rules. Because once Disney entered the picture, the game changed completely. And what followed wasn't just a contract dispute or a salary adjustment. It was a betrayal that insiders claim cut deeper than anything Reynolds had experienced in his career.
Yeah, we developed the script 6 years ago, wrote this fantastic script. It leaked online and Deadpool fans went nuts for it. So the studio granted us a small amount of money to make test footage. This test footage that we shot then sat on the shelf for 4 years, as it does. They didn't do anything with it.
To understand just how shocking that betrayal was, we need to rewind the clock. Back to when Reynolds wasn't Hollywood's billion-dollar golden boy. Back to when Deadpool was a joke nobody wanted to tell. Before he was Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds was Hollywood's almost guy. The actor studios liked to cast in mid-budget comedies or sidekick roles, hoping his natural charm could save a script that wasn't working. And while he had hits like Van Wilder and The Proposal, he wasn't taken seriously as a leading man, especially not in the action or superhero space. In fact, most fans remember his first major superhero outing as a complete disaster. In 2011, Green Lantern hit theaters. Warner Brothers poured massive money into it, risking Reynolds could anchor a new DC franchise. The result? A critical and financial bomb that nearly ended his career in big-budget blockbusters. Hollywood labeled him as a nice guy who just couldn't carry a superhero universe on his shoulders. And for most actors, that would have been the end of the story. But Reynolds didn't quit. In 2009, before Green Lantern, he had already appeared in X-Men Origins, Wolverine as Wade Wilson, except it wasn't really Deadpool. The studio gave him sewn lips, laser vision, and stripped away everything that made the character iconic. Fans hated it. Reynolds hated it. It was the kind of role you quietly bury and move on from. Instead, he made a decision. He was going to resurrect Deadpool the way fans knew him, even if it took years. That's when the real grind began.
A little under 2 years ago, it leaked accidentally onto the internet.
Accidentally.
And, well, here's the thing. The fans freaked out, the Deadpool fans freaked out and overwhelmed Fox, and Fox basically had to greenlight the movie.
Reynolds teamed up with writers Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, crafting a script that captured the essence of the merc with a mouth. But every studio executive they pitched laughed it off. An R-rated superhero movie with a lead character who swears, breaks the fourth wall, and makes jokes about his own studio? Nobody believed it could sell. For years, the project collected dust. Meetings ended with executives shaking their heads. Too risky, too niche. It'll never work. But Reynolds didn't let it go. In fact, he pushed harder. He wasn't chasing a paycheck. He wanted creative revenge. He wanted to prove Hollywood wrong. Then came the turning point. In 2014, a few minutes of CGI-heavy test footage mysteriously leaked online. The clip showed Deadpool cracking jokes, flipping through traffic, and breaking bones with cartoonish violence. Fans went wild. Social media exploded. And suddenly, Fox was cornered. After ignoring the project for years, they had no choice but to greenlight it. Reynolds never admitted it outright. But most fans and insiders believe he leaked the footage himself. And in 2016, the risk paid off. Deadpool became a box office juggernaut, raking in $782 million on a budget of just $58 million. It wasn't just successful, it obliterated expectations. Critics hailed it as a fresh, disruptive take on the superhero genre. Fans embraced it as a victory lap for a character they'd been begging to see done right. And most importantly, it turned Ryan Reynolds from the guy who flopped in Green Lantern into the guy who just rewrote Hollywood's rules. But here's the catch. In Hollywood, rewriting the rules comes with consequences, because once you you prove the system wrong, the system doesn't forget. By 2019, the game shifted again. Disney, the mouse-shaped empire that built its reputation on family-friendly blockbusters, acquired 20th Century Fox for a staggering $71.3 billion. That meant Deadpool, the raunchy, R-rated superhero who had just proven R-rated comic films could dominate, was now technically part of the Disney brand. Fans were thrilled at first. For the first time in history, Deadpool existed under the same roof as the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and the Avengers. The possibilities seemed endless. Imagine Deadpool trading insults with Iron Man, or breaking the fourth wall in the middle of an Avengers battle. The hype was unstoppable, but behind the curtain, the mood wasn't celebration. Disney had built its entire empire on a strict formula: safe, family-oriented, PG-13 blockbusters. The executives in charge weren't laughing at Deadpool's dirty jokes or over-the-top violence. They were uncomfortable. The language, the fourth wall breaks, the gore, everything that made Deadpool unique clashed with Disney's tightly polished brand. At first, the pushback was subtle: quiet conversations about toning things down, gentle nudges toward PG-13 edits, whispers that maybe Deadpool could be adapted into something more family-friendly. For Reynolds, it was déjà vu. The same executives who once told him Deadpool would never work were now holding the keys to the character he had worked hard to bring to life. Still, he tried to play along. He smiled in interviews. He cracked safe jokes at press tours. He promoted upcoming projects like nothing was wrong. But behind closed doors, insiders say he was already sensing the walls closing in. The same studio that had once ignored him was now trying to control him. And then came the breaking point. The one thing that proved this wasn't just about branding, it was about power. When Reynolds' team sat down to review the profit participation terms for Deadpool and Wolverine, they discovered something shocking. His back-end deal, the percentage of profits he would earn after the movie's success, had been quietly restructured. What had once put him on par with Hollywood's biggest stars was now reduced to a fraction. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a compromise. It was a cut so deep that insiders described it as one of the coldest moves in recent Hollywood history. To Reynolds, it wasn't about the money. It was about respect. He had built Deadpool from nothing. He had willed it into existence. And now, the very company that had inherited his creation was treating him like a disposable cog in a billion-dollar machine. For fans, everything looked fine on the surface. Reynolds was still cracking jokes, still appearing in interviews, still teasing Deadpool's future. But insiders claim this was the moment the war began. Because if there's one thing Hollywood should have learned by now, it's this: Ryan Reynolds doesn't lose quietly. Hollywood is ruthless, but this move shocked even insiders. When Ryan Reynolds' team combed through the final participation terms for Deadpool and Wolverine, the numbers didn't add up. The payout he had been promised, a share of the profits that once put him shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's elite, was suddenly changed. Gone was the star-level compensation he had earned with the earlier Deadpool films. In its place, a deal so reduced it looked like the studio was treating him as a replaceable employee, not the architect of a billion-dollar franchise. And make no mistake, Reynolds was more than just an actor reading lines. He was the producer, the writer, the marketer, the driving force. Without him, there would be no Deadpool. He was the one who leaked the test footage that forced Fox's hand. He was the one who fought through rejection after rejection when studios said the movie would never work. And he was the one who delivered a record-smashing R-rated hit that reshaped the entire genre. So for Disney to slash his deal wasn't just a financial cut. It was a knife to the back, a message, a reminder of who really held the power. Insiders close to the situation described it as one of the coldest salary maneuvers in recent Hollywood history. And that's saying something, considering how often studios battle stars over back-end profits. But this wasn't a faceless star walking away from a contract. This was Ryan Reynolds, the man who was Deadpool. For him, money was never the sole motivator. Sure, it mattered, but what mattered more was ownership, authorship, creative control. Reynolds wasn't looking for a paycheck. He wanted a say in his legacy. To him, the salary cut symbolized something far bigger. Disney was stripping him of his authorship. The empire he had fought to build was being quietly pulled away from him, brick by brick, until all that was left was a smiling face on a red carpet. And the betrayal didn't stop at the numbers. Rumors began circulating that studio executives were already brainstorming ways to soften Deadpool's edge for the broader Disney brand. Meetings allegedly floated PG-13 alternatives. Executives whispered about family-friendly edits, the exact qualities that made Deadpool a global phenomenon. The R rating, the language, the self-aware absurdity were the very things the studio wanted to bury. To the public, Reynolds laughed it off. He smiled in interviews, cracked sarcastic jokes, and kept the machine moving. But insiders close to him saw the difference. They described him as furious, not the loud, table-flipping kind of angry, the quiet kind, the kind that simmers, builds, and sharpens into strategy. Because here's the thing about Reynolds. He doesn't just accept betrayal. He turns it into fuel. He had already proven once that he could beat the system when everyone thought Deadpool would fail. And now, with Disney slashing his deal and boxing him in creatively, the stage was set for something even bigger. But instead of exploding publicly, Reynolds made a decision that shocked even his closest allies. He wouldn't scream. He wouldn't fight in interviews. He wouldn't wage war in the tabloids. He would do something far more dangerous. He would go silent. On the outside, nothing seemed wrong. Ryan Reynolds kept up his usual charm. He walked red carpets, posed for cameras, and delivered quick, funny sound bites in interviews. He promoted Disney Disney's version of Deadpool like a good soldier. To the average fan, nothing seemed off. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. Insiders claim Reynolds began quietly documenting everything. Every restriction placed on his interviews, every social media post that needed approval, every idea shot down by studio executives. The same man who built his reputation on viral jokes and off-the-cuff humor was now being forced to filter every word through Disney's corporate machinery. And slowly, fans started to notice. The jokes weren't as sharp, the banter wasn't as fast, the charisma wasn't gone, but it felt muted. In one interview, he half-joked about being an artist rattling the bars of a cage. Fans laughed, but those close to him insist it was no joke. That was a warning, a glimpse of the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. But instead of lashing out, Reynolds did something far more calculated. He played the long game. Through his production company, Maximum Effort, Reynolds began building what insiders now call his quiet rebellion. On paper, Maximum Effort looked harmless, a quirky side project churning out gin commercials, Mint mobile ads, and viral soccer promos. But look closer, and it wasn't just ads, it was proof. Proof that Reynolds didn't need Disney to make an impact. Proof that he could capture global attention with nothing more than a clever idea, a small budget, and his own creative instincts. Fans thought he was just being playful, but insiders say every commercial, every viral video was a strategic test. Could he outmarket Disney? Could he create cultural moments without a billion-dollar machine backing him? The answer was clear, yes. And then the real bombs started dropping. Trademark filings spotted by fans revealed names that were less like sitcom pitches and more like coded messages. Mousetrap, Fourth Wall, IP Freely. Titles so on the nose that fans instantly connected the dots. These weren't random jokes. They were daggers. Satirical declarations aimed directly at Disney. Insiders claim Reynolds even co-wrote the pilot for Mousetrapped himself, a story about a superhero actor betrayed by his studio who decides to destroy them from within. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Fans didn't see it as fiction. They saw it as prophecy. And while Disney executives may have believed they had silenced Reynolds, they hadn't noticed what he was really doing. He wasn't just being quiet. He was sharpening knives. He was networking. He was laying the foundation for something bigger. Because when a man like Reynolds goes silent, it isn't surrender, it's strategy. On the surface, Reynolds' company Maximum Effort looked like nothing more than a quirky side hustle, a place where he could mess around with gin ads, poke fun at mobile carriers, and drop viral clips that seemed designed just to make the internet laugh for a few minutes. But to those paying closer attention, it wasn't random at all. It was calculated. It was a proof of concept. Every ad campaign, every viral skit, every carefully timed video was a demonstration of what Reynolds could do without Disney's billion-dollar marketing machine. He was testing something that Hollywood had always assumed was impossible, that a single actor with a small team and a fraction of the resources could rival the cultural reach of the biggest studio on Earth. And the results were undeniable. Aviation gin spots didn't just sell alcohol, they became memes. Mint mobile ads didn't just promote a phone plan, they spread like wildfire across Twitter and TikTok. His viral soccer promos for Wrexham turned a lower league football club into a global talking point. Every project, no matter how small, cut through the noise. And it all came from Reynolds' creative instincts. Instincts that didn't need a Marvel logo to work. And then came the most dangerous move of all, the trademarks. Eagle-eyed fans noticed that Maximum Effort had quietly filed for titles that didn't sound like safe comedies. They sounded like open challenges. Mousetrap, Fourth Wall, IP Freely. At first people laughed, assuming Reynolds was joking. But then whispers started. What if these weren't jokes? What if these were coded messages? Insiders claim Fourth Wall wasn't just an idea. It was already being developed. A dark comedy about an actor betrayed by his studio, who then decides to tear it down from within. The parallels to Reynolds' own career were so obvious, it was chilling. And according to some reports, he wasn't just overseeing the project, he was co-writing it. Every beat of the script was sharpened to cut close to the bone, a satirical blade aimed directly at the studio that had boxed him in. But it wasn't only about satire. Fourth Wall represented something bigger, the possibility of building a new kind of empire, one that didn't rely on billion-dollar studios, one that thrived on viral attention, direct fan engagement, and stories that weren't designed by committee. Reynolds wasn't just making jokes at Disney's expense, he was showing Hollywood what the future could look like. And the most dangerous part? He wasn't planning to fight alone. Because while Reynolds was sharpening his knives, Marvel itself was starting to crack. For over a decade, Marvel Studios had looked unstoppable. Billion-dollar box office hits, endless fan hype, and a cinematic universe so interconnected it became the envy of Hollywood. But by the time Disney acquired Fox, the cracks were already starting to show. And those cracks were about to align perfectly with Reynolds' rebellion. Behind the glossy premieres and billion-dollar headlines, Marvel insiders were burning out. Writers complained that their scripts weren't really stories, but spreadsheets. Each film wasn't designed to stand on its own. It was a puzzle piece in a never-ending pipeline. Emotional arcs were sacrificed, so cliffhangers could set up the next project. Character decisions were dictated not by creativity, but by corporate synergy. One writer admitted bluntly, "I wasn't writing a film. I was connecting two other films. I felt like a pipe, not a creator." It wasn't just writers. VFX teams, the backbone of Marvel's CGI-heavy films, began speaking out. Anonymous accounts revealed impossible deadlines, chaotic directions, and a factory-style grind that left artists exhausted exhausted and demoralized. Some even accused Marvel of running the most controlling production pipeline in Hollywood. Even directors, once eager to join the MCU, began leaving frustrated. Blade, hyped as Marvel's return to gritty R-rated storytelling, collapsed into chaos after going through 5 different scripts and multiple creative overhauls. Projects were delayed, retooled, or quietly shelved. And even Kevin Feige, the mastermind who had once orchestrated Marvel's flawless rise, was reportedly feeling the squeeze from Disney executives demanding more content faster. The machine was faltering, and that's exactly when Reynolds' quiet rebellion began to look less like a personal feud, and more like the start of a movement. Insiders claim that disillusioned Marvel veterans, burned-out VFX artists, frustrated writers, even a few ex-directors, began gravitating toward Reynolds, not just because he was charismatic, but because he represented something they craved: independence. He wasn't trying to squeeze creativity into a corporate mold. He was fighting to create outside of it. Whispers circulated that Reynolds had reached out to at least 3 former Marvel talents for collaboration on Fourth Wall. One was a screenwriter who had left after their script was shelved. Another was a director who had sworn never to return to the MCU. A third, a VFX supervisor who had publicly blasted Marvel's impossible workload. Together, they were shaping something that wasn't just a parody of the system. It was an expose. Fans picked up on the energy too. Meme pages began comparing Deadpool's Fourth Wall jokes to Reynolds' real-life war with Disney. Reddit threads speculated that Fourth Wall wasn't just a project, it was prophecy. For the first time, audiences weren't just following the character, they were following the man behind it. Disney might have believed they were silencing Reynolds, but they were missing the bigger picture. Marvel itself was hurting, and Reynolds wasn't just another star caught in the mess. He was becoming the face of a rebellion. So where does all of this lead? Fans are still lined up to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Disney is banking on the nostalgia of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman reuniting, hoping that a billion-dollar box office haul will silence all the whispers of conflict. And sure, the movie will probably deliver. Reynolds is too professional not to give fans the ride they deserve. But behind the scenes, insiders insist this is his final bow as the merc with a mouth. Because Ryan Reynolds isn't just planning an exit, he's plotting something bigger. Enter Fourth Wall. To the casual observer, it's just another satirical comedy in early development. But to fans paying attention, it looks like a ticking time bomb. A story about a superhero actor betrayed by his own studio, who then decides to tear it down from the inside. Too on the nose to be coincidence, too sharp to be dismissed as parody. And if rumors are true, the project is already being shaped by former Marvel insiders who've had enough of Disney's corporate grip. But Fourth Wall isn't just a project, it's a declaration, a message to Hollywood that creators don't need billion-dollar studios to tell meaningful, disruptive stories anymore. Reynolds has already proven he can outmarket Disney with a 30-second gin ad. Imagine what he could do with an entire show, one aimed directly at the system that tried to muzzle him. And the whispers don't stop there. Some insiders believe Fourth Wall could be just the start. Other projects under the Maximum Effort banner carry titles that sound like coded battle cries, mousetrapped, even IP freely. On their own, they sound like jokes, but together, they look like a manifesto, a roadmap for tearing down the empire brick by brick, one satirical dagger at a time. Fans, of course, are eating it up. Social media threads speculate daily. Memes compare Reynolds to Deadpool, not just in costume, but in spirit, the underdog anti-hero who roasts the system while fighting it from within. And the most dangerous part? Reynolds has the one thing studios can't manufacture: loyalty. His fans trust him. They believe he's fighting for them. That makes him more dangerous than any lawsuit, more unpredictable than any boardroom deal. If Fourth Wall does release in 2026, as insiders predict, it won't just be another show. It'll be a warning shot, a declaration of independence, and possibly the beginning of a movement that shifts power away from corporations and back to the creators. Because if Ryan Reynolds can walk away from Disney and still win, who else might follow? Ryan Reynolds' journey with Deadpool was never just about a superhero movie. It was about an actor who refused to quit, a character studios dismissed as too risky, resurrected by a single man's persistence. It was the ultimate underdog story, a cultural reset that proved fans were right and Hollywood was wrong. But now, the real battle isn't on the screen, it's behind the curtain. Disney may believe they've contained Reynolds by slashing his profits, muting his voice, and boxing Deadpool into their machine. But what if they've done the opposite? What if by betraying him, they've unleashed something far more dangerous? A rebellion powered not by lawyers and contracts, but by stories. Reynolds doesn't need Marvel's billion-dollar machine. He's already shown he can bend the internet to his will with nothing more than a clever ad. He doesn't need Disney's army of marketers. He's proven he is the marketing machine. And now, with Fourth Wall and other projects looming, he's positioned to do what Deadpool himself would do: take the fight directly to the system that tried to silence him. The question isn't whether Disney can keep making blockbusters. They can, and they will. The question is whether they can stop one man, armed with wit, charm, and an army of loyal fans, from proving that the empire isn't untouchable. Because maybe that's the real plot twist here. Ryan Reynolds didn't just bring Deadpool to life. He might be about to spark the rebellion that proves even the biggest empire can be defeated. And if that happens, Hollywood will never look the same again.
Please tell me Mr. Ramos is not replacing me as Dr. Doom via Parker Robbins. Is there something you're not telling me? Anyway, I don't want to step on your...
What happens when the man who built the Marvel Cinematic Universe decides he's had enough? Not enough like a polite retirement speech. Not enough like a quiet fade out into Hollywood legend status. I'm talking snap, like the kind you felt in your chest the day you watched Tony Stark take his last breath in Endgame. Only this time, the snap isn't in a movie. It's real. And the target isn't Thanos, it's Disney. For over a decade, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't just an actor in a franchise. He was the franchise. Without him, there is no MCU. No billion-dollar box office runs, no decade-long payoff, no shared universe as we know it. And for years, Marvel knew it, Disney knew it, fans knew it. But here's the thing about loyalty in Hollywood. It only lasts as long as it's profitable. Behind the scenes, the cracks had been forming for years. Missed expectations, box office bombs dressed up as victories, a growing disconnect between what fans wanted and what executives decided they were going to get. The kind of creative drift that can sink even the biggest brand in the world. And Robert Downey Jr., he'd been watching it all, quietly, patiently. But now, he's done watching. In private, insiders say he snapped. No more polished interviews. No more smiling through bad scripts. No more pretending the MCU was still the same machine that launched him from career purgatory to global icon. The man who once carried Marvel on his shoulders has just thrown down the gauntlet, and it's aimed squarely at the people who signed his paychecks. But this isn't just a celebrity versus studio spat. If what's being reported is true, this is a full-scale rebellion inside Marvel's highest ranks. One that could derail not only the next Avengers film, but the entire plan for the MCU's future. Why? Because Disney didn't just cross a line. They bulldozed right over it. And in the process, they may have pushed their biggest star into becoming their most dangerous enemy. Here's how it happened. It was supposed to be Marvel's next big torch-passing moment. The kind of storyline shift that could carry the MCU into an entirely new era. A young prodigy named Riri Williams steps into the spotlight, donning a high-tech suit of her own in the Ironheart series, positioned as the spiritual successor to Tony Stark himself. The pitch was bold. The marketing was confident. This was the future of Iron Man, we were told. And on paper, it should have worked. But from the moment the first episode dropped, something felt off. Fans weren't rallying behind Riri the way they had with Peter Parker, or even Shuri in Black Panther. They weren't debating theories or flooding social media with clips. Instead, the online chatter was cautious, confused, and in some corners, downright hostile. Critics, of course, had their talking points ready. They praised the show's themes, its representation, its necessary place in the cultural conversation. But the wider audience, they weren't buying it. Not emotionally, not even ironically. Streaming numbers told the story first, then the memes followed. And before long, Ironheart wasn't the exciting next chapter of the MCU, it was the punchline. Inside Disney, the panic alarms went off immediately. Budgets were slashed and doubled. Marketing strategies were rewritten on the fly. Emergency meetings popped up so often the boardroom looked like a military war room. But no matter what they tried, new trailers, rebranded social media campaigns, surprise cameos, the audience didn't bite. Worse, the data coming in from streaming platforms revealed something far more alarming than low views. Fans weren't finishing episodes. In industry terms, it's called completion collapse, when viewers start a show but drop off before the credits roll. For Ironheart, it wasn't a minor dip, it was a cliff dive. People weren't just losing interest, they were tuning in to roast it, tearing it apart on YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok, and then walking away. That's when Disney decided to pull out their nuclear option. If the audience wouldn't rally around Riri Williams on her own, they'd bring in the one person who could, the face of Marvel himself, Robert Downey Jr., the man who'd already saved the MCU once before. On paper, it was a can't-fail move, a quick cameo, a couple of interviews, a wink and a nod from the man who made "I am Iron Man" the most quoted line in superhero history. That should have been enough to breathe life into the project. But this wasn't 2012. The Marvel Robert Downey Jr. had once believed in wasn't the Marvel calling him now, and that's where everything started to unravel. At first, it sounded harmless, maybe even fun. Disney would set up a few interviews, a convention appearance, maybe a lighthearted segment on late-night TV. All Robert had to do was smile, crack a couple of Iron Man jokes, and say a few nice things about Ironheart. But somewhere along the way, the tone shifted. It wasn't just, hey, give the show a little boost. It became a coordinated PR push. Scripted talking points, carefully phrased answers, and a clear message. This show wasn't just good. If you didn't like it, the problem was you. Executives wanted Robert to go further, much further. He wasn't just supposed to praise Riri Williams. He was expected to defend her and the show by attacking the critics. That meant calling out controlling fan behavior, suggesting that negative reactions were rooted in controversy. And here's the thing, Robert Downey Jr. isn't naive. He's been in Hollywood long enough to see how these narratives executives get weaponized. He knew exactly what was happening. Inside sources say the pressure came from the very top: Bob Iger, Kevin Feige, and other Marvel brass, all reminding him of his contractual obligations. They pointed to clauses in his deal for Avengers, Doomsday, the massive MCU film he was rumored to return in. They told him his participation in this PR campaign was non-negotiable. Robert pushed back, politely at first, but every no was met with more pressure, more reminders about what he owed the brand, and eventually the conversation stopped being about Ironheart at all. It became about control, about whether Robert Downey Jr., the man who rebuilt Marvel from the ground up, would be willing to stand in front of cameras and gaslight the fans who had been with him since day one. The breaking point came during a private video call, one insiders describe as explosive. RDJ didn't mince words. "I won't play this role." And he wasn't talking about Tony Stark or Dr. Doom. He was talking about becoming Disney's scapegoat, the smiling shield between the executives and the fans they'd alienated. From that moment, there was no going back. The star who wants to find the MCU wasn't just refusing to help. He was ready to walk away entirely. And that's when Disney realized they'd just started a war. The thing about Robert Downey Jr. is he's not the kind of guy who shouts for show. When he blows up, it's because something has been building for a long, long time. This wasn't just about a TV series. This was about years of watching the house he helped build start to rot from the inside. Insiders say the video call started civil. Kevin Feige, Bob Iger, a few other high-ranking execs on the line. The usual pleasantries, the "we appreciate everything you've done for the brand" kind of talk. Then the real pitch started. A little heavier this time, more direct. The phrases brand loyalty and long-term vision kept coming up. Robert let them talk. He's patient that way. But patience only works until someone tries to sell you a story you know isn't true. And that's what happened next. One exec allegedly told him, point blank, that his support for Ironheart was critical to maintaining the illusion of momentum for Marvel's Phase 5 rollout. That without him, fan sentiment could tank the next Avengers movie before the trailer even dropped. In other words, lie for us, or watch the house burn down. That's when Robert lost it. He didn't just refuse, he torched the entire premise. He told them straight, if Ironheart failed, it wasn't because of fans. It was because Marvel had forgotten how to tell a story people actually cared about, because they'd replaced characters with checklists, arcs with algorithms, heart with hype. The line insiders say he dropped: "I won't play this role. Not for Tony, not for Doom, not for anyone. You're asking me to gaslight the people who built me. That's not going to happen." Silence. For a moment, no one knew what to say. It wasn't supposed to go like this. RDJ was supposed to nod, smile, and sign on the dotted line. Instead, he'd just made it clear. Not only was he walking away from Ironheart, he was willing to walk away from everything. And here's the thing about moments like this. They don't stay private for long. Within days, whispers about the blow-up were making their way through the Marvel machine. Agents heard about it. Other actors heard about it. Hollywood heard about it. And in an industry built on image, the idea that Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man himself, had just stood up to Disney, that was dangerous. Because if he could do it, maybe other stars could too. But what really made this moment explode wasn't just the argument. It was the fact that Robert knew exactly what Disney was trying to do. He'd seen it before. And that takes us to the pattern. Robert Downey Jr. might be the face of Marvel, but he's not blind to Hollywood's habits, especially Disney's. And when he looked at the Ironheart situation, he recognized the playbook instantly. You've probably seen it too, even if you didn't realize it. A project drops, the hype is huge, the brand declares it a game changer. But then the audience watches it and something's off. The pacing drags, the writing feels forced, the magic isn't there. Fans start voicing concerns online, reviews start to dip, memes start flying, and instead of taking that criticism on the chin and asking what went wrong, the studio flips the script. Suddenly it's not the story's fault, it's the audience's fault. You didn't get it, you're afraid of change. And to deliver that message, they don't send out the director, they don't put a producer in front of a camera, they wheel out the most beloved actor from the project, hand them a carefully worded statement, and ask them to make the fans feel guilty for not loving it. Sound familiar? Robert thought so too. He'd seen it just a year earlier with Obi-Wan Kenobi. The show struggled with pacing, writing, and reception. Fans voiced their concerns, some legitimate, some not. And then, almost overnight, Ewan McGregor appeared in a polished video, condemning hateful Star Wars fans and framing all criticism as rooted in controversy. The message was clear. If you didn't like the show, you weren't just a disappointed fan. You were part of the problem. And here's the thing, it worked for Disney once. They took heat off the creative team and shifted the narrative. But it also left a bad taste in a lot of mouths, including Robert's, because he saw it for what it was. A shield, not for the actor, for the brand. So when Marvel came to him with the same game plan for Ironheart, he wasn't surprised. He was just done playing along. He'd watched this pattern stretch beyond Star Wars. Pixar had done it. Marvel had done it before with other stars. The formula was always the same. Weaponize the goodwill of a fan-favorite actor, deflect blame, and avoid accountability. Only this time, they picked the wrong legend to run it on, because Robert Downey Jr. wasn't about to stand in front of millions of fans, many of whom had been with him since his first shaky press tour for Iron Man in 2008, and tell them they were wrong for not loving a show that wasn't built for them in the first place. And when he refused, he didn't just break the cycle, he exposed it. But if you think that was the end of the story, you haven't heard about the role that could have changed everything. The role of Dr. Doom. Here's the part Disney really didn't want getting out, because up until now you might be thinking this was just about Ironheart. It wasn't. Behind the scenes, Marvel had been cooking up what they thought was their ultimate power move, a way to bring Robert Downey Jr. back into the MCU without undoing Tony Stark's emotional send-off in Endgame. The plan? Not Iron Man, not a multiverse variant, Dr. Doom. Yes, the most iconic villain in Marvel's catalog. A genius, a tyrant, a sorcerer, a ruler. The kind of character that could dominate the next decade of MCU storytelling. And when word of that possibility leaked to the fandom, people went wild. But here's the kicker. Insiders say the talks weren't just casual. They were real. Disney had already been in closed-door negotiations with RDJ for months. They pitched him a fresh, darker arc, a way to reinvent himself in the Marvel universe as its ultimate threat. Not nostalgia, not a cameo, a full transformation. And Robert, he was interested. This wasn't about cashing in. This was about the challenge, about shaking up his own legacy, proving he could vanish inside a role so completely that fans would forget they were watching Tony Stark. It could have been a game changer. It could have re-energized the MCU in a way no surprise cameo ever could. But then came the catch. You want Doom? Fine. But first, you play ball. You promote Ironheart. You defend it publicly. You make the critics look like jokers. The fans look like villains. You tell the story we want told. And then we'll sign the Doom deal. That was it. That was the line in the sand. Because for Robert Downey Jr., Dr. Doom wasn't worth selling out his principles. He wasn't going to buy his way back into Marvel by lying to the audience that had stood by him for over a decade. So he walked. The Doom contract was left unsigned. The role that could have been Marvel's masterstroke? Frozen. The story that could have dominated headlines for the right reasons? Gone. And here's the savage irony. Disney thought they were holding all the cards. They thought they were playing chess, but they didn't realize their queen had just flipped the board. The moment Robert Downey Jr. walked away, the ripple effect inside Marvel was immediate. The Avengers, Doomsday script put on hold. Marketing plans paused. Merchandise tied to the movie's big twist villain frozen in warehouses. But it wasn't just about the logistical mess. It was the message this sent through Hollywood. If Iron Man himself could walk away from the biggest entertainment company in the world over a matter of principle, what did that say to every other star currently under contract? And the whispers started. Chris Evans, Anthony Mackie, Mark Ruffalo, actors who had been expected to play ball with Marvel's next phase were suddenly hesitant. Because if Robert Downey Jr., the guy who is Marvel, had lost faith in the studio, maybe they should take a second look at their own deals. Executives noticed fast. Meetings that were supposed to be about filming schedules started turning into conversations about trust, creative direction, and contract flexibility. Disney wasn't just losing a star, they were losing control. The panic spread beyond Marvel. Talent agents started calling other studios, testing the waters for their A-list clients. Competing networks and streaming giants began quietly circling, looking for cracks in Disney's once impenetrable armor. And while all of this was happening, Marvel's track record over the last few years was catching up to them. Eternals had flopped with audiences despite critics trying to spin it as misunderstood genius. Thor: Love and Thunder had turned one of their most powerful heroes into a cosmic punchline. The Marvels had lost money at the box office. The pattern was undeniable. The brand that used to feel bulletproof now looked tired, out of touch, predictable. And here's the cruel twist. The one thing that might have saved them was exactly the thing they'd just destroyed. Because Robert Downey Jr.'s return, in any capacity, would have been the ultimate crowd reset button. The kind of moment that makes even the most jaded fan think, okay, maybe I'll give them one more shot. Instead, they got headlines about their biggest star publicly refusing to defend them. That's not just bad PR, that's a fracture in the foundation. And if that fracture keeps spreading, Marvel won't just lose Robert Downey Jr., they'll lose the very trust that made the MCU possible in the first place. Here's the twist Disney didn't see coming. This wasn't the PR disaster they feared. For a huge chunk of the Marvel fanbase, Robert Downey Jr.'s refusal to play along wasn't a betrayal. It was a relief, because fans have been feeling something's wrong for years. It started as little things, a rushed plotline here, a flat character there. But over time, it became a pattern. Movies that looked great in trailers, but left you cold in the theater. Shows that promised had game-changing stakes, but disappeared from conversation 2 weeks later. And when fans spoke up, they weren't met with, "We hear you." They were met with lectures, accusations, the implication that if you didn't love every new release, you were the problem. But Robert Downey Jr. just did something almost no one at his level ever does. He publicly sided with the audience. He didn't insult the cast. He didn't go after the crew. He didn't make it personal. He simply said, "I'm not going to lie to the people who put me here." And that hit differently. Because this wasn't just a superstar trying to protect his image. This was the man who had been Marvel's heart and soul for over a decade, reminding fans that they weren't crazy, that they weren't hateful for wanting good storytelling, that their loyalty wasn't something to be used wrongfully for quarterly earnings calls. In a way, Robert became the fan's voice inside the machine. And that's why people started cheering. On Reddit threads, in YouTube breakdowns, in fan podcasts, the same comment kept popping up. Finally, someone said it. And here's where things get dangerous for Disney. Once you realize your biggest star agrees with the criticism, it's a lot harder to dismiss that criticism as noise. Because now, it's not just angry tweets or bad Rotten Tomatoes scores, it's Iron Man himself himself telling the world, yeah, this isn't working. And if Disney thought that kind of public sentiment was going to fade away quietly, they were wrong. Because what Robert Downey Jr. just did wasn't just about Marvel. It was about the way this entire industry treats its audience. Let's be clear, this isn't the end of Marvel. The MCU will keep going. There will be more movies, more shows, more hype cycles. But something has changed. Because once the illusion cracks, you can't unsee it. And right now, millions of fans have just watched their most trusted Marvel figure take off the armor and say, I don't trust this anymore. For over a decade, Robert Downey Jr. was the embodiment of Marvel's magic. He turned a bankrupt studio into a billion-dollar powerhouse. He transformed a B-list comic book character into one of the most beloved heroes of all time. He gave the MCU its heart, its humor, its humanity, and in return, the studio tried to use that legacy as a shield for their own mistakes. But here's the thing about Robert Downey Jr. He's lived a life where everything he has could disappear overnight. He's clawed his way back from rock bottom. He knows what's worth protecting and what's worth burning to the ground. So when Disney asked him to trade truth for loyalty, to sacrifice his credibility for a PR spin, he didn't hesitate. He burned the bridge. And in doing so, he lit up the sky for everyone watching. This isn't just about one actor walking away from one studio. It's about the message that sends. Because if Marvel keeps prioritizing branding over storytelling, quotas over character arcs, and lectures over connection, they won't just lose Robert Downey Jr. They'll lose the audience. And no multiverse, no fan service cameo, no billion-dollar marketing campaign can fix that. In the end, the thing that built Marvel wasn't the tech, the costumes, or the special effects. It was trust. Trust that when you walked into a theater with that Marvel logo on the screen, you were going to get something worth your time. And if the man who was Marvel for over a decade is now saying that trust is broken, maybe it's time to start listening. You've been waiting years for Deadpool 4, the R-rated Marvel event everyone said would break the mold. The return of Wolverine, the crude jokes, the fourth wall chaos, the kind of movie that would make Disney blush and fans scream. But what if I told you the most outrageous part of Deadpool 4 isn't in the script? What if the real story isn't about explosions or cameos or even Ryan Reynolds, but about something far stranger, something that could change movies forever, and not in the fun way? Because according to multiple insiders, Deadpool 4 isn't just another blockbuster. It's a warning, a test run, a case study for a future where actors don't act, directors don't direct, and the characters you see on screen, they aren't even human anymore. Sounds dramatic, right? That's what Ryan Reynolds thought too, until the day he walked into a private Disney screening room, sat down to watch a rough cut of his own movie, and realized he wasn't in it. At least not him. The face was his, the voice was his, the smirk, the timing, the exact little squint in his eyes when Deadpool makes a sarcastic jab. All perfect. Too perfect. Because he never performed any of it. And in that moment, Ryan Reynolds, the guy who has spent almost a decade shaping Deadpool into a fan favorite, stood up, turned around, and walked out without a word. That wasn't just actor frustration. That was the start of a war. And the craziest part? The whole thing began with something that looked harmless. For months, the cast thought they were making just another Deadpool movie. Yes, it was gonna be wild. Yes, Hugh Jackman was back as Wolverine. And yes, the studio was hyping it as bolder than anything Marvel had ever done. Fans assumed that meant more epic fight scenes, dirtier jokes, maybe even a few unexpected cameos. But inside Disney's production offices, bold meant something else entirely. It meant dangerous. Production insiders now say the first red flags appeared long before the walkout. In subtle ways nobody thought twice about at the time. A slightly awkward interview here. A joke from Reynolds about being replaced by a robot there. Things fans laughed off, but that the cast might have meant literally. It all came to a head one quiet afternoon in Los Angeles. Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, and a handful of senior crew were called into a private screening. No press, no executives from marketing, just the inner circle. They were told it was a rough cut, early footage, incomplete effects, a few missing scenes, pretty standard for mid-production. Reynolds took his seat expecting to see the usual mess. Green screens, unpolished VFX, maybe a stuntman in a motion capture suit standing in for Deadpool in a fight sequence. What he saw instead was finished. Deadpool on screen was smooth, polished, perfect, like the final version you'd see in theaters. But the real shock? Ryan had no memory of performing any of it. Not the scene's dialogue, not the expressions, not the tiny comedic pauses between lines that fans instantly recognize as Reynolds being Reynolds. The voice was right, the timing was right, but it was a copy. A flawless digital replica built from pieces of his real performance, and a lot of pieces he'd never given. That's when the air in the room changed. Reynolds didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He just stood up and left. The silence he left behind said more than words ever could. Hugh Jackman reportedly got the call within the hour. His response? Not confusion, not disbelief, rage. Because if what Reynolds had seen was real, it meant their likenesses, their voices, their movements were being recreated without their knowledge. Not for a stunt double, not for a single effect shot, but for full scenes, entire performances made of pixels. And the source of those pixels? That's where things get dangerous. It started as just another piece of set equipment. The cast called it the booth, a small white tent tucked away behind the main stage. Everyone stepped inside eventually. It was presented as a standard lighting reference station, totally normal for a big-budget film. An assistant would greet you, maybe a VFX tech. They'd ask for a few still poses. Turn left, turn right, read a couple of generic lines with no context. Nothing strange, or so it seemed. In reality, that booth was a state-of-the-art full-body 3D scanner, not just a photo rig, something far more invasive. The cameras didn't just take images of your face, they mapped every micro-expression, every tiny twitch of muscle under your skin. They recorded the way your eyes adjusted to light, the way your jaw shifted when you smiled, even the subtle asymmetry of your frown. And that was just the visual part. After the scan, you'd step into a sound booth, again presented as routine. Pick up audio for later editing, a few random syllables, isolated laughs, breaths, short, out-of-context phrases. At the time, nobody questioned it. Studios often collect wild lines for ADR, background dialogue you can slot into a scene later. But this wasn't ADR, this was data collection. Hundreds of tiny vocal clips, grunts, and laughs were fed into a proprietary AI engine. Cross-reference those with a 3D scan and you get something insiders now call a performance library, a complete reusable digital clone of an actor. And once that clone exists, you can make them say anything, do anything, forever. No scheduling conflicts, no retakes, no residuals, just drag, drop, and render. The actors didn't know it then, but every time they stepped into that booth, they weren't just helping make Deadpool 4. They were giving Disney the raw material to make infinite Deadpool sequels without them. The project even had an internal codename, Infinity Cast, and soon that quiet little booth would ignite one of the biggest behind-the-scenes fights in Marvel history. By the time the booth rumors started circulating on set, the damage was already done. The scans were complete, the audio banks were full, but nobody understood the scope until one strange file started making the rounds inside Disney's post-production team. It was called the Phantom Cut, not an official version, not the rough cut Ryan had seen. This was something entirely different, a Frankenstein assembly of scenes, stitched together not from filmed performances, but from generated ones. Entire conversations between Deadpool and Wolverine, never filmed, never scripted, but flawless in delivery. Fights that didn't match any known choreography from set, close-ups of Reynolds' face reacting to lines he'd never heard before, with micro-expressions that looked almost real. To the untrained eye, it was just another early edit. But to the editors who handled it, the truth was chilling. This wasn't post-production magic. This was full AI replacement. And when Hugh Jackman saw his part in it, he snapped. According to multiple crew members, Jackman had been called in for what was pitched as a preview of a newly enhanced fight scene. Instead, he was greeted by a clip of Wolverine delivering a monologue in the middle of a forest. The problem? Hugh had never been in that forest. He had never spoken those lines. "That's not me," he reportedly barked at the screen. A staffer tried to calm him down. "It's Wolverine AI V2, they said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. That's when Jackman lost it. He stood up, told them they could finish the movie without him, and stormed out. It wasn't just an actor protecting his ego. This was a man realizing that his likeness, the Wolverine fans had loved for decades, could now be copied, altered, and used for decades more, without him ever stepping foot on a set again. The blowback didn't stop with Jackman. One VFX artist walked off the job after being instructed to create an entire Deadpool fight sequence using the AI assets without informing the actors. Editors raised quiet concerns to supervisors, only to be told it was part of the pipeline and to keep quiet. By now, word was spreading among the cast. Whispered phone calls, late-night texts, everyone asking the same question. How much of this movie is us, and how much isn't? But while this was exploding behind the scenes, Disney was making a very different kind of move in public, one that made the whole situation 10 times more infuriating. Here's where the story takes a twist that's almost too ironic to believe. At the exact same time, Disney was secretly building AI versions of Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, and the rest of the cast. They were also suing other companies for using AI. In public, they were the loudest voice in the room, warning about the dangers of fake content. They filed lawsuits against platforms like Midjourney, accusing them of creating images that could cause brand confusion. They warned the public about the ethical nightmare of AI-generated art misusing Disney's beloved characters. But behind closed doors, they were doing the exact same thing. Multiple leaked documents confirmed that early Deadpool 4 posters, some showing Deadpool flipping off the Eiffel Tower, others with Wolverine in front of a burning Disney castle, weren't the work of human artists at all. They were AI-generated, not by random fans, but by Disney's own marketing department. They used Midjourney, they used Runway, they even used internal proprietary tools built for exactly this kind of image generation. And fans had already started to notice. In teaser trailers, Deadpool's shadow would sometimes lag a fraction of a second behind his movement. Wolverine's eyes would blink too smoothly, like animation instead of muscle. In one shot, a reflection in a window didn't match what the characters were doing in the scene. At first, viewers laughed it off as bad CGI, but after the leaks, those glitches became evidence, proof that something artificial had been baked into the film from the start. When fans began asking questions, Disney didn't respond. They didn't deny it. They didn't explain. They simply deleted certain teaser videos from YouTube, unlisted trailers, and replaced marketing material without a word. The cover-up only made things worse. And then came the real smoking gun, a leak that didn't just hint at AI use, but spelled out Disney's plan in cold, legal language. A single sentence buried deep in a revised contract that would send shockwaves through Hollywood. The leak didn't come from an actor or even a disgruntled crew member. It came from the kind of person you'd never expect to be at the center of a Hollywood scandal. A legal watchdog group. In late May 2025, an anonymous envelope landed in their office. No return address, no cover letter, just a thick contract stamped confidential and a single sticky note with 2 words written in sharp, rushed handwriting. Read page 17. Buried in that page, halfway down a block of dense legal jargon, was a single sentence that made even seasoned lawyers stop in their tracks. The studio retains all rights to digitally replicate, simulate, or generate the likeness, voice print, and performance profile of the talent in perpetuity. Let that sink in. Not for one movie, not for a franchise, not for the duration of an actor's career, forever. And it got worse. This clause hadn't been in the original contracts the actors signed. According to internal memos, it was added after filming had begun, slipped into a revised version under the guise of production updates. No meeting, no negotiation, no consent. But what exactly is a performance profile? That's where the rabbit hole turns pitch black. The memo described it as more than just a scan of your face or a recording of your voice. It was your emotional rhythm, the way your breathing changes when you laugh, the subtle shift in your eyebrows when you're sad, the exact speed you blink when you're caught off guard. In other words, they weren't just capturing your image, they were digitizing your soul. And this wasn't just theory. The internal name for the program was Infinity Cast, because once they had your performance profile, they could drop your digital twin into any scene, any movie, any decade without you forever. When this document hit the cast, panic turned to open defiance. Ryan Reynolds reportedly called an emergency meeting in New York. No agents, no studio reps, just the cast, stunt doubles, 2 laptops, and a handful of trusted legal experts. The goal? Figure out how to shut this down before it spread to every studio in Hollywood. The meeting lasted over 5 hours. Lawyers combed through the Infinity Cast clause line by line, and what they discovered was worse than anyone expected. Disney wasn't just claiming ownership of the AI versions. They were arguing that these clones didn't even count as the original actors, legally speaking. Because they were transformative works, Disney claimed, Ryan AI wasn't technically Ryan Reynolds. Wolverine AI V2 wasn't technically Hugh Jackman. They were new creations, and therefore outside the reach of performance rights. It was a legal loophole big enough to drive the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe through. Hugh Jackman made his position clear. He was done. No reshoots, no cameos, no Deadpool 5. Because the moment he stepped on set again, they could scan him, tweak him, and use him for the next 20 years, without paying him a dime. Ryan Reynolds, meanwhile, started rallying support from other actors quietly facing similar situations. Word spread fast. Background extras, stunt performers, even voice actors who had been asked to record harmless sound libraries for video games. One VFX artist who had worked on multiple Marvel films walked off mid-project after being told to animate a fight scene exclusively from AI assets and not to inform the cast. Another pulled their name from the credits entirely, saying they didn't want to be associated with a simulation pretending to be a movie. And this resistance wasn't limited to Disney. Once the Infinity Cast leak went public, other studios started reacting. Warner Brothers issued a press statement saying they would never use AI likenesses without actor consent. Netflix quietly updated their contracts to strictly ban AI simulations unless the performer agreed in writing. Even Universal made a public pledge for full transparency in visual effects. Disney? Total silence. But behind closed doors, panic was setting in. And that's when the fight escalated from a private rebellion to a public spectacle. Because one final leak was about to hit the internet, and it would blow the whole story wide open. The final blow didn't come from an actor, or a lawyer, or a fan. It came from inside Disney's own visual effects department. Late one night, a single file leaked onto a private industry Discord. The file name alone was enough to send Marvel fans into a frenzy. HJF/Forest Fight Final Full MUVHJ. Move within hours, Reddit had cracked the code. HJF, Hugh Jackman Forest Fight. Final, the completed scene. Full M, full motion. UVHJ, unverified Hugh Jackman. The footage was clear. Too clear. It showed Wolverine in a forest, tearing through enemies in a savage, unbroken sequence. Every muscle flex, every roar, every slash of the claws, perfect. But there was one problem. Hugh Jackman had never filmed it. The AI-generated Wolverine moved just slightly too smooth. His eyes blinked in unnatural sync, and there was a cold, mechanical precision in every movement. The file's metadata confirmed what fans feared. This wasn't archival footage. It was built entirely entirely from the Infinity Cast library. And when that realization hit, the internet exploded. At Comic-Con, fans ditched the usual cosplay for protest signs. Real actors, not code. Wolverine deserves a pulse. One viral sign read, "Hugh will follow you, not your copy." On YouTube, creators started dissecting every Deadpool 4 trailer frame by frame, pointing out glitches, Deadpool's reflection lagging behind, Wolverine's lips moving a split second off from his words. A video titled, "This Isn't Hugh Jackman," hit 3 million views in under a week. Disney tried to scrub the evidence, deleting teaser videos, replacing posters, but the Streisand effect was in full swing. Every deletion only fueled the outrage. And then, just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, another leak hit. This one wasn't about a single movie, it was about the future of every movie. The second leak came from a source deep inside Disney's corporate strategy team, and it made Infinity Cast look like a side project. It was a pitch deck for investors, labeled Franchise Continuity as a Service. The plan was simple, terrifying, and from a corporate standpoint, genius. By 2030, Disney would maintain a vault of fully scanned AI-compatible versions of every major actor they'd ever worked with. Heroes, villains, side characters, entire ensembles. No casting delays, no contract negotiations, no scheduling conflicts. Just select a character, load the performance profile, and generate a brand new movie without a single human stepping in front of a camera. They promised consistent tone, perpetual franchise life, and complete creative control. Translation? No more aging actors, no more actors refusing roles, no more pay disputes. Ryan Reynolds? They could make him star in Deadpool 9 in the year 2045, even if he'd retired or never agreed to the project. Hugh Jackman? They could keep Wolverine alive on screen until the end of time, even if Jackman himself never put the claws on again. It wasn't about telling stories anymore. It was about locking down intellectual property so tightly that the human element, the thing that makes movies movies, would be gone. And the kicker? Deadpool 4 was just the test case. According to the pitch, if audiences didn't notice or didn't care about AI performances here, Disney would start rolling it out across the MCU, Star Wars, and even Pixar voice roles. Within 5 years, fully AI-generated blockbusters would be the default. For Disney, this was about control, total control, over the characters, over the actors, over reality itself. And once that door is open, there's no shutting it. Conclusion. So when you finally sit down to watch Deadpool 4, remember this. The laughs, the fights, the moments that hit you in the gut, they might not belong to the people you think they do. In fact, they might not belong to anyone at all. Because in this new Hollywood, the faces on screen might be real, the voices might be real, but the souls, those could be long gone. And when the credits roll, you have to ask yourself one question. If the actor isn't really there, did you even watch a movie at all?